full disclosure, I'm super high right now. RWBY Volume 8, Episode 3, Strings. You know why he's there, but we'll get to that later, because that was amazing. Whole episode. I actually enjoyed. So I mentioned, if you didn't see my last review, please check it out. I appreciate it. One of the big things was like, all right, I think we all knew this was going to happen. It was like, that amazing ending we got last time. It was like, what the heck's going to happen to Oscar? I was like, if they're probably going to switch it to something else. I was hoping that they wouldn't, but I'm okay with the episode they actually gave us. Overall, that's always going to be more important. Like, what happened to Oscar? That was a great fight that we got, and we had some really cool story elements in this episode too, but I was okay with it, because that was my main thing. I was like, they're not going to give us the answer, right away, and I was okay, because I was like, all right, I thought it wasn't going to work. I thought it would be like, we'll see, but it was a good episode, and there was a lot to unpack. It was actually like a really important episode, technically, for the entire series. This is technically going to be like one of the most important episodes, because we officially know Ruby's semblance. So they don't have a name for it, but I just wrote she has molecular deconstruction powers with a pretty flare of flower, the flower petals. So that's interesting. Also, I do have to randomly throw this question out there, because it has to be asked now, because they technically gave us her power. And then I still have to ask the question, so is she choosing to have, the scarf just flow behind her, or is that technically part of her power? Like, if she didn't have that, would she just be like a gust of wind and petals? Like, it's molecular deconstruction. Like, that's just the flare on it. Like, that's literally it. So, if it wasn't that, like, what's underneath? These are the things you think of when you're high. But it changed the whole visual for me. Like, the whole game of her, I guess it really is just her scarf. I mean, I always kind of looked at it as it was her almost in a bullet. Is like the best way I could honestly describe it. Like, that's the image that I always kind of gather, especially because of the way they show it. I just always kind of, in my head, was like, somewhere in there, which is technically still the case, is her body. But I didn't think it was like on a, spatial molecular level. I was like, maybe she just squished down or tiny or something. I don't know. But that's what I always thought. And I was like, she can just grab people. Like, they use the image of the scarf and it's just like, bloop, and it's gone. And so I'm like, okay, so she has, it's almost like an atom thing. Like, what's the weird connection between her semblance and the actual item? Because it just, that's all the questions it brings up, is like, so how would it look visually if it wasn't with the scarf? Like, what, there's so weird, dumb questions which they probably won't answer. But that popped into my head, so I wanted to talk about that. But I love it. It's fine. It makes sense, technically. Once again, that brings in the question of, like, the whole scarf thing. Like, what would it look like? But she shrinks down to a molecular level. Technically, she deconstructs everything, which is insane. Like, that's just crazy. Like, on a small scale, that's why, I mean, they all have superpowers, but on a small scale, like, if she could somewhat manipulate that control, like, technically she already did it with, to other people, that could be insanely deadly, but that's not what the show's like. But, Ruby's semblance. That was very interesting. I was like, okay. She's got the cool pose at the end when she was, like, excited that she took things to a next level. It was a funny scene. The way they did it with Penny, I thought was entertaining. Like, they did a lot of that animation where it was just random stuff in animation, like her pointing like, we'll go left, right, and forward and stuff like that. And then her explaining it was like 2D and stuff. And I was like, okay, they're doing a lot of like the upbeat sort of effects. And, it's been a minute, I feel, since we've had like a real Penny moment. And I feel like this was one of those episodes. Like, her jokes are always like that. But I was like, there's just those moments. Like, that's a Penny moment. So I enjoyed that. I was like, all right, this is cool. We get to see, more of Penny. And then they have the serious stuff. So, of course, Penny is like, all right, well, you guys kind of need me, right? And it's like, well, you might technically be safer up there because we want to keep you as far away from Salem as possible. And it's like, oh, the dynamic is changing, which we do see by the end. She kind of agrees, and it's like, all right, it's technically a safer choice because we still, they're finally coming up against Salem. They've been kind of losing this whole time, so it's like, it's not exactly like they know what they're up against, really. So she thought about it, and was like, all right, well, I guess I'm gone. So that should be interesting to kind of see how that goes really into, like, the next episode, like, if they're going to merge together a little bit, or, just how that's going to play out. But I'm looking forward to that answer, in next week's episode. But the emotions were high for the characters, and, like, Penny had some good stuff, but I just want to get to Nora, honestly. So, Nora was amazing. I have to talk about this. Why didn't Penny fly? Like, that whole fight, I was just watching, I was sitting there, I was like, until she literally got knocked off, I was like, why won't she fly? Like, I get she has wind powers and the maiden stuff, but I'm like, they can't fly. None of these people can fly. So just do something. I guess that was their way of kind of writing it in, because I also thought the same thing. I was like, she could have flown around the room this whole time. And the dude, and I meant to look his name up, but I completely forgot. I always forget his name, although it's, I mean, Harriet #1, obviously. And she just, man, I love her more and more each episode. But, you know, it was like, she could fly this whole time. And he could just be like, hey, boom, you know, stay. Like, literally, they were all, she was in a narrow, you know, viewpoint. And it was just like, well, she's just on the bridge. As soon as they knocked her out, he should have just, like, leaned around somebody, like, hold on, freeze, you know, stay. And it would have been over in a second. But obviously, it had to be big. But that was the thing. Once again, it was just like, why isn't she flying? At least that, you know, because I'm like, him doing that, it's like, okay, I can kind of excuse it. It was a really great sequence. And I was like, why isn't she flying? That would literally, like, end this entire battle. But I guess that was how they just had to write it in. Because I'm like, I still feel like they could have done it where it was like, oh, I can't get a beat on her. That would have been, they could have just wrote that right in. Like, he wouldn't be able to hit her, you know, if she's in midair. So they have to use, you know, other means. But the way it played out, it still looked great. I just had that giant question, like, she decided not to fly until the very end. And I thought that was super weird. And she totally turned on that whole I would never hurt anyone thing. That was interesting because I was like, she's ready to destroy these people. She brought up the lasers. And then, of course, stay. And she's brought down and everything's cool. And it's like, all right, we finally got her. You know, Aesop wants her to give Salem the spear, which I think I forgot that part for, you know, from the last volume. Unless that's new. Because I feel like that's Aesop's thing. It's like, I don't remember Ironwood actually saying, like, he specifically wants to do that to let him go. I think he mentioned it, but I don't remember if that was, like, specifically his plan. And maybe that was the in-game stuff once, technically, you know, Team RWBY kind of kept all those secrets, and they were like, that plan sucks, and that's not their new plan. So maybe that was somewhere in there that I just forgot, but I was like, I don't remember if Ironwood wanted them, like, give up the spear. But either way, they kind of want this. I thought he wanted her to fight. That's what I thought. And then they said give up. And I was like, I don't remember that. So maybe you guys can let me know. That was probably somewhere and I just forgot. But I was like, as soon as they said that, I was like, I don't remember Ironwood saying, hey, give her the spear so we can all be safe. But I forget a lot of stuff, you know, from the last volume. So please let me know about that one because I thought that was really interesting. But, second thing, I have to mention this. Bill is definitely hated, the guy that got yelled at, and fuck that guy, because clearly that was the final straw. That wasn't the first time Bill screwed up, and everybody hates Bill, because they were just like, Bill. So, you know, hashtag fuck Bill. He did something, you don't get yelled at, and everyone thinks it's justified, unless you've been effing up, so, you know, I don't know what Bill did, but he ain't cool, So, Nora, we'll start with the emotional stuff, get to the cool action stuff. So I love the segment where it was Nora, Weiss, and Blake. And so, you know, they're like, oh, you know, don't worry about the team. And, of course, Nora mentions everyone except for Ren. And, like, you know, she just stops. And they're like, interesting. Like, you didn't mention the person you basically mentioned first in every conversation. That's interesting. So Nora's having an identity crisis. So she doesn't know who she is without Ren. And, of course, you know, he's, I'm sure, feeling the same way. So I'm hoping, and I might be super high, and that's why I'm so hopeful right now. But I'm like, man, I would really love some Nora and Ren development, and I think they could do a really great job with the characters from this position, because after they have, you know, this moment where it's like, you know, figure out who you are, you know, without Ren, just who are you all together. And I also like the way that they help, you know, like Weiss gave her perspective, like, you know, sometimes sisters just argue for a while. It's like, oh, that's cool. That's like a deep part of her character. And then, you know, Blake chimed in like, you know, sometimes you spend so much time with someone that you forget who you are. And it's like, oh, that's a great chunk from, you know, her character development. So I really love that scene for how they implemented the story just through like kind of simple lessons, but it's like we've seen those lessons kind of play out through this series. So I thought that was a really cool moment. That was like, it was subtle because they weren't like, remember my flashback, you know, it wasn't like that. It was just like simple sentence, simple bit of advice, and it's like, yeah, we know why you said that. Like we've seen enough, you know, from the show to be like, they can put simple stuff like that in, and it's just like, crap, you're right. You know, that was, you know, for those characters, that was a very kind of profound moment. So I loved it personally. Might be looking too far into it, but I thought it was great, and it seemed like it had some amazing potential. Because then, of course, we have Nora figuring out who she is, being tough and you know hitting things, and she had one of the coolest moments ever. As soon as she looked at the door. As soon as she looked at it, they did this twice in the episode. So first was with the Aesop's dude, or no, technically the second one was with the Aesop's guy at the end, where it was like, oh, he gave that look. That's the important thing. There's so many things to talk about in this episode. he gave that little look like, oh man, I'm not too cool with this. Like, what a shock. That guy who totally seemed like he'd be that guy might end up being that guy. I'm curious how that'll play out, but we shall see. But Nora doing the whole lightning thing, I loved it. So if you didn't get it, full cowling. That's what Nora did. I think that was 100%. I was over 100% full cowling. Great moment. Great moment. I absolutely loved it. She got like the charged lightning around her and stuff. And I was curious. As soon as it showed up, I was like, at first I was a little scared because I was like, if this is a super long scene, I'm scared that she's gonna die at the end because it's like it was clearly like, oh, her body's physically changing. That's too much power. And so I was worried. I was like, if this keeps going beyond like her hitting the door open, this might be scary because it could kind of wipe her character out. So I was a little worried about that. And then she hits, and then when the power does leave her body, she has actual scars. She has lightning strike scars. And I was like, that's really interesting. That once again could lead to some amazing development for the characters because it's, as of now, she's having her identity crisis. Ren is kind of going inward, and so she just had this crazy moment where she's been scarred, and we still don't know what's gonna happen with Oscar. Like at this point, Ren is just like like the way they did it, where it seemed to really focus on Ren during that fight. It's like he gave some real expressions. He was the first one that because he was the one that kind of freaked out, was like, let him go, which we don't see from Ren very much. So that was a telling scene there. So after who knows, that might be a screw up, that might be a failure, but we don't know what's gonna happen with Oscar. So that's where Ren is right now. And then if this fails and he comes into it and it's like they finally reunite and it's like I failed Oscar and I wasn't even there to save like the person I've known my whole life, that could be great. It could be great. It would be it might be very emotional and sad and all this lovey-dovey stuff, but who knows. And that's if Nora doesn't die. We shall see. I mentioned it in my last review and I was like, the petal, and then it like goes away, and I was like, that could be cool. Spring Maiden, that could be death. Sakura blossoms are very quick, 2 weeks. So I don't know. That was interesting. She's wounded at least, so maybe that's it. I think it'll be good. That's what I'm hoping for, of course. I think that was everything. Yeah, I think one random other note. This isn't actually written down. I just remembered it. Also during the fight, Harriet she needs her moment. Harriet was amazing this whole episode. Clearly, she got the main focus. She was the one who's super mad, and I also think that she might end up being the one who becomes like the villain on that side of things. Like everyone, the way they write it, it's like, oh man, Ironwood is the worst ever. And I'm just watching this episode, like the way they even in the last episode, she was the one who looked at Winter, so that you can tell when they're putting focus on somebody. And it was just like, she wants to go Crow based on the opening, and she's the one that's gonna have an important thing. And I'm like, what if she ended up just doing whatever and just like went completely rogue? Clearly, she can pull it off. She's kind of in those early Atom stages where it's like she just has super speed. But as of now, she was the only one who was going in, and she was on some Rock Lee junk. That's the whole reason I went on this little tangent. It made me think of Rock Lee. The way she was like kind of running around when she got the supercharge. I was like, oh, that's a good moment. So two other epic references that I can pull. You got My Hero, you got my Naruto, my Naruto. But that's totally perfect. It's the new Naruto when it first came out. That's what people said about My Hero. Like, that's interesting. But that's the episode. I'm obviously still super high. But I love the episode. Harriet was amazing. That's all I really need. But we got a cool action scene. We got Watts at the end. I was like, okay, they're gonna control it. That was definitely in the opening. So once it happened, I even read a comment where somebody mentioned that last week, and they were worried about it. Unfortunately, that's the case. But I was like, yeah, like the mirror scene now makes perfect sense because it's her looking at her dad, and then the other side of her is broken. I was like, oh, something's wrong here, and who was on the other side of the mirror? It was Watts. So visual representation. I'm excited for that though. I think that'll be pretty cool when it eventually happens. We'll see how fast the season actually kind of pans out. That would probably have to take a couple more episodes, but that's probably some mid-season, almost season finale type stuff where it really gets crazy, and he has control because he's gonna escape, right? Like somehow Watts is gonna get control of Penny, and by the end everything's gonna come out. It's gonna be like that really hype moment. I'm hoping. We shall see, but I'm like, even if that works for Ironwood, it's gonna go wrong. Something's gonna happen. It could just be that they end up, of course, fighting Team RWBY again. But I was like, I feel like it could be bigger. With Salem being like, just over the wall, it could be bigger. So we'll see. But it's like, she's gonna get taken over. A couple episodes. But I'm looking forward to that. Of course, I would love to know what you guys thought about this episode. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, least favorite parts about it. Going forward, I would love to know predictions. I mean, is Nora gonna die? Like it just, the opening and then this was like, that could be like another moment where she does it and just wipes herself out. Like she could have like literally an explosive death. So I don't know. It's, I don't want Nora to go. If I had to pick, it'd be like not Nora, because I feel like her and Rin seriously need more. But then it's like, who do you kill off? Jean? Maybe, yeah, definitely. But you know, you don't want anybody to go. Not yet, at least. There's more development, then we'll see. But we'd love to know your thoughts, predictions, hopes, fears, even. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.